Welcome to Marketing Made Simple TV. My name is Jeff Ogden, the host of the show, and I'm really excited about today's guest, Jay Baer of Convince and Convert. Jay's presentation today is Confiscate the Keys. Who will be responsible for social media in your company? I think that's a pretty funny title. I think Jay came up with something really, really cool. He's a social media expert. He writes the extremely popular blog, ConvinceandConvert.com. It's one of the top-rated blogs in the country, and he's the co-author of a book called The Now Revolution, and he's working on a new book, which we're excited to hear about. And we're going to talk about three things today. One, is social media the responsibility of marketing in your company, or should it be in a different department? Are young people better able to handle social media than older people? And is social media a skill or a job? Interesting questions. So let's welcome Jay to the show.
Hey, Jeff. How are you?
I'm good.
Thanks very much for having me. Your hat is majestic, sir.
Well, good. Yeah. I zoomed my camera in a little bit, so we'll see how this works. But, yeah. So anyway, let's start off with the question I ask every guest on the show. Who are you and what do you do?
I am Jay Baer. As you know, I run a social media and content consultancy. We call it a social accelerator called Convince and Convert, and we work with corporate clients and agencies all across North America, helping them take their content and social programs from good to outstanding. My background is in digital marketing. I've been in online marketing since 1994, which is about as long as you could have been doing this professionally, and have worked with 29 of the Fortune 500 since then. And as you mentioned in the show open, I write the Convince and Convert blog and books and speeches and all that kind of stuff. So always a lot of balls in the air, and always delighted to help people with their social media and content marketing questions.
Very good, Jay. And what we're going to talk about here on this show with you is we're going to rely on your expertise on social media. And a lot of companies are struggling with it because social media is very new. What are some of the most common mistakes you see companies make today, Jay?
Well, that's about 6 shows in and of itself. But I would say one of the biggest challenges is companies taking the historical sort of marketing playbook and just trying to apply it to a social media world. And so what you have is companies turning social media into the world's shortest series of press releases, where all it is another vehicle for them to talk about themselves and how fantastic their company is, when in fact social media is a much more personal, human type of connectivity that really requires companies to act more like people, which is of course not the way companies have acted for a long time, and that's what makes social media difficult. It's not so much that the tools are hard, it's that it requires companies to behave differently.
So you're basically saying that it really causes a big change in corporate culture and corporate behavior. So what do you think, how would you recommend that companies think about the world of social?
Well, this may sound trite, but I use this line a lot, so I will continue to use it on your show, which is that social, what companies need to do is worry about being social first, and worry about doing social media second. And what I mean by that is that if you try and figure out what sort of relationship does your company want to have, or what sort of relationship can your company have with its customers and prospective customers, and the other questions about how to do social media and what tools to use become quite a bit easier to answer. And I think we get wrapped around the axle a lot about the technology and Twitter this or Facebook that, when really what we're trying to do is act more like people and build relationships with customers one at a time or a few at a time, as opposed to thousands and tens of thousands at a time, which is the way traditional broadcast advertising and marketing has been done.
Well, certainly one of the advantages of social is it allows companies to show a human face, and I think that is a very good point. Speaking of this, there was an article in Inc. magazine which was kind of interesting, and I'll show it, see if I can pull up the headline here, is 11 Reasons a 23-year-old Shouldn't Run Your Social Media, which has caused a bit of controversy. So let's talk about the issue of companies tending to hire people who know social because they did it personally, they grew up around social, which are young people, and some of the challenge it creates. What can you share on that, Jay?
Yes, and that particular article that you just showed was a response to the original shot across the bow, which was an article that said that only 23-year-olds should do your social media. So what you have there is the counter punch, not the original punch, but it has been quite an imbroglio here in the last few weeks, and a lot of people in the social media world nattering and chattering about this question. As you might suspect, the young people say, yeah, it should only be young people, and the old people like me say, no, it shouldn't be young people. There tends to be a very distinct dividing line on this issue based on age. But from my perspective, working with a lot of companies on decentralizing social, taking social media beyond just a single person in marketing, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. Social media is the new telephone. We talk about that a lot in my book, that social is the new telephone, especially Twitter. And things happen faster in and on social media than they do in any other facet of your business. And so I think the easiest way to answer that question is, who should be the person who is on the front lines of true real-time business? And I don't know that the issue is one of age. I think the issue is one of judgment. Now, I think in many cases, judgment and age go hand in hand. It is a lockstep progression, but not always. There's a lot of young people I know who have incredible judgment, and there's a lot of old people I know who have terrible judgment. So I think when we say, should people be this age or that age and manage social media, that's the wrong question to ask. I think the question is, where do you find people with the judgment and the communication skills and, frankly, the common sense to do social media appropriately?
I like that point, Jay. I think you're right. The communication skills, judgment, common sense, that's what really drives it. So one of the things you just talked about was the need to decentralize social media. What do you mean by that?
Well, social media is, because it is becoming the new telephone, right? It's not just a way for your company to proactively send messages out to your publics, right? There is definitely a response mechanism that's important there. There's a lot of other elements to it. And I think what you're seeing now is that companies, first and foremost, especially larger organizations, are pulling from the ranks of their customer service team and their operations team to staff the front lines of social. And I think that is a best practice. Let's find the people who actually have the most understanding of the organization. In fact, I wrote a blog post about this a while back that said that, geez, why would you not put somebody in charge of social who can answer the highest percentage of customer questions? Because if you're the person manning social and the customer says, well, what about this? And then you have to go ask somebody else, what good are you? All you are is an impediment. You're like a voicemail at that point. So you're seeing more and more customer service type employees involved in social, and I think that makes a lot of sense. And then the sort of next evolution of that is true decentralization of social, where you realize that if companies are supposed to be human in social, the best way to do that is with humans, to actually get your salespeople, your executives, your operational staff, and each of them are participating on behalf of the brand with their own account. So how do you train all your sales team? How do you train all your executive team? How do you train all your engineers to interact with customers and prospective customers in a useful, non-stalkerish way? And my company does a lot of that kind of training of organizations, as do many other consultancies out there. And I think it's a really important field of study.
Jay, when we were talking earlier, you had a really good example of a very innovative company in how they were using social, and I'd like you to share that story with our audience, and that was Hilton, of how they're actually using it. Could you share the innovative ways that Hilton is using social media?
Well, Hilton Worldwide, and my friend Vanessa Sain Dieguez is their global head of social media strategy, and so she oversees all the different Hilton brand initiatives, and they're actually doing a number of very interesting things in social, both at the corporate level and at the individual brand level, like DoubleTree, etc. This particular program is called Hilton Suggests, and Hilton has a group of concierge staff all across a number of cities in the U.S. I believe it's U.S. only at this point, and what they do is they monitor Twitter in real time. And when somebody has a question that they can answer, they just answer it. So somebody said, hey, I'm in Dallas, any good restaurants? And Hilton Suggests, which is at Hilton Suggests, just jumps into that conversation and says, oh yeah, by the way, there's a great restaurant over here. And it turns out the person that they gave that assistance to wasn't staying at a Hilton hotel. They were staying at a competitor's hotel. There's a story when this program first started a few months ago. Somebody had a sick pet and just sort of went on Twitter, hey, anybody know a vet? And somebody from Hilton Suggests said, oh yes, there's a great vet at 13th and Q. And the person took his dog there, and the dog was made well, and then went back on Twitter and said, I cannot believe that unprompted Hilton Hotels just gave me a vet recommendation. So it's that kind of participatory sort of interaction with customers at their moment of need is a really interesting way to use social, but of course requires a number of people participating. One person couldn't conceivably handle all of that, and that's why for them it's a decentralized program with a lot of people participating.
That's a wonderful story, Jay, and I really like it. In fact, one of our earlier guests on the show was Don Peppers, who wrote a book called Extreme Trust, and one of his concepts is how can you see the world through your buyers, and how can you service those buyers? And Hilton's is a great example of delivering service without asking anything in return, and it creates trust, which is just a beautiful thing. So
yeah, I mean, the companies who get it are the companies that are playing the long game, not the short game. And it's hard to do that, right? It's hard for companies to say, look, this may not pay off in the next hour or the next week or the next month or the next quarter, but this is going to pay off eventually, and we believe that to be so. That takes a level of courage and a level of conviction on the part of the company that frankly not everybody has.
Yeah, Jay, I agree with you. Yeah, it takes conviction. It takes a core belief that this is the right thing to do. And you're right, not everyone can do it. So we've talked about a few things. We've talked about, you need to not do social, but actually think human, right? We talked about it's not just about 23-year-olds, right? It's about the judgment. It's about the decision-making, communication skills. And one more question I want to ask you is in terms of when companies are in crisis, right? And we see it all the time. I just gave you the example when we were talking before about Progressive with all the ads on TV, and then they got some terrible press, and it's all over social media. How do companies deal with crises in social media where they can't control the message?
Well, Progressive is a great example because it's not a social media crisis. They didn't do anything in social media to create this. It just manifests in social, and that's a good lesson for us all. Is that anything that happens to your company that's even slightly negative will manifest in social media first, and it will manifest in social media loudest, which goes back to what we were talking about earlier with who is on the front lines, who has the judgment and the skill set to handle that. Because if you think that a social media crisis will never happen to your company because you're too small, you're too insignificant, or you're too this or too that, you're crazy. I hope that it never does, and probably it won't. But if a crisis does occur, you're going to want to have a handle on it. And I think what that requires is companies to do some actual crisis exercises. Most of your social business consultancies out there, like ours and our friends at Sedera Works and Dachis Group and other companies, will actually walk organizations through social crisis scenarios where it's almost like being a pilot in the trainer computerized aircraft, right? Well, what if this happens? What if somebody hijacks your Facebook page? And I think part of it is making sure that you allow customers to vent. So there's this understanding or sometimes belief that if there's a crisis that occurs, that we should not give customers a place to argue it out, because it just turns even more negative. And actually the opposite is true. You want to give customers a pressure relief valve, whether that's a blog post with comments or a discussion board or a Facebook page, because a lot of times they just need to get it off their chest. And while it may seem counterintuitive, you are far better off as a company having people complain on real estate that you control as opposed to on real estate that you do not control. For example, it may feel uneasy, in fact, oftentimes it does, but you are much better off having people yell at you on your own Facebook page than having the same group of people creating a Your Company Sucks Facebook page where you now have no rights and permissions.
Interesting. Yes, yes, you're right. You don't want a your company sucks page, but yeah. In terms of kind of the audience for these kind of messages, obviously we've got the small companies, the 5 to 500 employees, but you've also got the GEs, the Hewlett Packards, the Ciscos. You know, what are the lessons for, like one of the things in your book, I know, the Now Revolution, and you talk about company culture. And you give some examples, but most of them are 100, 150. How do you control your culture when you're a Hewlett Packard, right? And you're a massive organization. You can't just have the CEO walk around there.
No, you're exactly right. And that's why you have to have, in organizations like that, culture comes, it's a culture sandwich, right? So you have to, of course, have a very supportive culture from the top. And in big enterprise organizations like that, you're only going to get so far unless you have true executive support for being social and for humanization and the kind of things that we're talking about. But you also have to empower and enable employees to work from the bottom up, to work off script, to actually demonstrate humanity, to demonstrate this type of customer first mentality without a pyramid style command and control structure. A great example of that, of course, continually is Southwest Airlines, right, where they allow their employees and, in fact, encourage their employees to work off script. I wrote a blog post a while back about a scenario. I was on a flight, and a kid was, a small boy was taking crayons and drawing pictures, and he drew a picture of an airplane, and a flight attendant noticed it as she was walking down the aisle, brought the kid up to the plane, got on the microphone, introduced Abraham to the entire plane and said, "He's done such a nice job with this drawing. We're going to put it up here at the front of the plane so that everybody can see it." Took a Band-Aid out of the first aid kit and taped it to the bulkhead door so that everybody could see it. And then a little while later, brought him up again for a second drawing. And it just made this kid's day, right? So he was absolutely thrilled. Parents were thrilled, put a smile on the face of every single person on that plane. And I wrote a post about it, and it ended up being in their in-flight magazine and on their company blog and things like that. But I think it's a great example of allowing employees to seize the moment, to not say, well, Section 2.5 of our policy guidelines says I should handle it this way. But if people have the freedom to actually act like a real person, it's amazing what can happen. In fact, I saw another example this morning. It didn't happen this morning, but I heard about it this morning from Panera Bread Company, where a guy whose grandmother is unfortunately quite ill and terminal with cancer, she said she really wanted some soup, and what she loves the most is clam chowder from Panera Bread Company. They only make clam chowder on Fridays. So this guy went down to his local Panera in New Hampshire, if I recall, Maryland perhaps, and said, "Hey, here's the story." And the store manager said, "Yeah, absolutely, we'll make you some clam chowder special on a Tuesday." Made him some clam chowder, gave him a box of cookies as well. Grandmother said, "Wow, that really made my day." And he just offhanded posted it. Just, I'm just going to post it to their Facebook wall. "Thanks very much, Panera, you were great." It has subsequently garnered 500,000 Facebook likes and 22,000 shares on a one person's post, because one employee at Panera at a single outlet of a giant franchise was enabled and empowered to work off script.
Jay, I think this is a great idea to wrap up the show with you, because I think the whole command and control idea of the fact that everybody can say no and one person can say yes has to go away. And you're exactly right. You've got to empower people to make small decisions throughout the company and trust people to make the right decision. So,
well, we talk about that in the book, right? There's this notion that you can't trust your employees in social media. And if you can't trust your employees to make good social media decisions, you don't have a social media problem. You have a hiring problem, because you've already given your employees all the weapons to kill your company. You've given them an email address and a cell phone number and a network password and a company car and insurance policy or whatever else you've given them, and a business card, but you're afraid for them to answer somebody on Twitter. That's a symptom of poor training and poor hiring. It's not social media's fault.
I want to thank Jay Baer for being on our show today to talk about social media in businesses. Some great lessons here. That social media is about making a human face on your company. It's about empowering people to make small decisions like Panera Bread and Hilton and some of his other examples. And I'm really excited to also let you know that he's going to be back for a subsequent show. So we're going to have a chance to talk even more to Jay, and I want to thank him for this. Reminder that Marketing Made Simple TV publishes every Thursday at noon Eastern Time, and our sponsors, Avatage, Digital Ethos, and Watchitoo. And there's some more big names coming very soon on here. So visit our sponsors, and we'll see you every Thursday on Marketing Made Simple TV.